Now we've an extra programme. Brian Moore, who commentated on the 1966 World Cup final, is joined by some of the members of the 66 team to present a tribute to Bobby Moore, who died last week.
Footballers and their fans fell silent at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, where the crowds were large and nowhere was it more poignant than before West Ham's game at Sunderland. Or indeed, right across the grounds of this country. To where there were no crowds at all giving their thoughts to the memory of Bobby Moore. And for young and old alike, these were channeled inevitably towards that sunlit day of glory in July 1966. His milestones have been chronicled fully these past few days. 108 caps for his country, captain in 90 of them. 554 games for his beloved West Ham, a winner in the FA Cup, the European Cup Winners' Cup, the World Cup. Two of his greatest World Cup adversaries, Franz Beckenbauer of Germany and Pele, will pay their tributes too. In a career that was launched in 1958, there weren't many things Bobby didn't win. But what else?
He was one of my greatest pals. I mean, we were great friends in the game. And we had a lot of fun together, a lot of fun. We really enjoyed each other's company. We had great trips, we had great times. And I tend to remember that more than his football. I mean, football speaks for itself. But I look behind the man and I think that guy was a great guy, a smashing bloke.
I'm pleased to be here to give a tribute to Bobby, and I think it's I'm privileged to do so. I tinge with that. I was very reluctant in one sense because I felt it could be very difficult for me to handle in this response.
Yes. I mean, he was a good buddy, wasn't he?
Knowing Bobby, we joined the West Ham as kids, 15, 16 years of age.
And it was on the West Ham training ground that young Moore and young Hurst began to learn their trade. Among their first teachers were Noel Cantwell and Malcolm Allison.
Yeah, I first saw him when he was 12 years of age. And at the time I was captain of West Ham, and the manager asked me if I'd coach the youth team or the young players, you know. So I said, yes, I would. Bobby was in this group. I lived in Barkingside and he lived in Barking. And he stood at the bus stop and he said, can I sit next to you, Mr. Allison? So I said, certainly, Bobby. And then after every training session, we used to go home and he used to talk to me and ask me different things. And I used to tell him different things about training. And the one thing that stuck in his mind, I think, was that I said to him, you must always know what you're going to do with the ball before you receive it. And that was one of his great qualities. And he said that he took that to every ground in the world.
Yeah, I think it's a tribute to the club that and the coaching and the development of young players via Ron Greenwood. That three, in a sense, players with some basic talent could be nurtured to become players that could play an integral part in England winning the World Cup. And that's a great credit to the club.
Basic talent.
I
mean,
was
a lot of people
including
say-
myself, perhaps saying basic talent as far as myself is concerned. But in fairness, I think Bobby would admit that, I suppose at 15 or 16, he was a raw recruit. And I think for the early years, he was, in some senses, we'll talk about the first 2 or 3 years, an average player. But the difference with Bobby, he had a tremendous thirst for knowledge and desire to become successful. And I think that the thing that struck me about Bobby as a kid, he had tremendous willpower. We used to have a little exercise at West Ham where all the professionals and ground staff, prior to training, the trainer said, lie on your back, lift your legs in the air a foot. The last person to put their legs down would win it. It was nothing, win anything, but win it. Invariably, Moro was the last man to put his legs down. And I mean, the willpower he had was absolutely fantastic.
Bob and I were roommates for the whole of my England career. As you know, Bobby was an immaculate man, and he used to lay out his clothes all in lines, and his watch used to be immaculately put on the side of the bedroom cabinet, and everything was all in standard procedure, and he was the most wonderful roommate to have, because nothing was ever out of place. I mean, most footballers, they go in, the old joke, wipe your boots on the mattress and shoes on the mattress. But Bob was absolutely spotless and immaculate.
Best. Faced by McDowell and Bonds, and still he gets it across there, and Bobby Moore under a lot of pressure with Lord very close quarters. Moore pushing that one behind for the corner.
As a player, he had two qualities. One was this innate ability to read the game, and I discovered that at Aston Villa in the quarter-final of the FA Youth Cup, when he was 16 and 17. Everybody's beaten, back four, the keeper, the ball's lobbed over, just about to bounce in, Bobby's on the line. Chests it down, and typical, even as a raw recruit at 16 or 17, did he head it away, did he wallop it away? Just walked it along the goal line, just carried on and played it out.
Wasn't the best head of a ball in the world, but nobody ever beat him in the air. Wasn't very quick, but nobody ever got a chance to run him. His timing of things were phenomenal.
Craven to win it in the air, to flick it on there for Payne, but Moore again sticking out that very experienced foot to turn it away into touch.
As Bill Shankly used to say, the first yard of the game is in your head. And that was Bobby. The first yard was always in his head. He was always a yard ahead of people.
I think that's the most important thing, to have the character and to have the personality. I mean, his ability to play, a lot of players in the world, you know, they have maybe the same abilities, but what makes then different to the rest of the players? It's the personality, it's the character, and I think Bobby, he was like Pele. I mean, I played together with Pele 1 year, and he was really maybe the best player in the history of this game. For me, Bobby Moore was the best defender in the history of this game. And the character of both, the abilities on the field, and the character and their lifestyle and the attitude, they are almost the same. So both Pele and Bobby Moore, they were, let's say, perfect people. Almost. Who is perfect? Almost.
Bobby and Pele, the almost perfect people, and perhaps the perfect match when England, the holders, lost 1-0 to Brazil, the eventual winners in the 1970 World Cup.
Chaplin scored 9 goals in their qualifying games to reach this stage of the competition. There's Pele now, and Bobby Moore stops him.
People only remember the big game, you know, the World Cup or the final, you know. Of course, we have a very good the opportunity to be together in New York, for example. We had the national team of United States. We played together in the same team. Then we spent a lot of time together. That was the time who I knew better, you know, Bobby Moore. And then we have a lot of fun moments, you know. It's very hard when you lost a good friend, you lost a nice person like Bobby Moore. And then in my position is, I think, worse than anyone, because besides to play with him, to play against him, we were a very good friend outside of the field.
The friendship that Bobby and Pele forged over the years developed first after that 1970 match that many still regard as Bobby's finest.
At the top level, against the greatest players in the world, he could take it off. I mean, he was taking the ball off top players. He made a timely tackle, didn't hardly touch the particular player, who just more or less fell over the ball. He did it to about 4 or 5 of the Brazilians on the day.
Pele also got a goal in that game. Costeo, and again Bobby Moore in there to stop him. What a superb bloke to have in your side. Then he got 2 defenders back, Brian LeBone and Bobby Moore. Now Muller is coming. Gazeta going all the way to the goal, and Moore stops it. What a player this fellow is.
Would you say he was the greatest captain that England have had, Jack?
I think you've got to look at his record and say, yes, he's the longest, won the most. He's got to be the best captain England's ever had. just for the fact that he was there that length of time. And he played through some great players in his position, and he played through them all.
But Jimmy Greaves can tell of another side to Bobby Moore.
He did have a wicked, if not evil, sense of humour, as we all know. I mean, many's the time when he's gone along the line of the England team introducing the players by the wrong name. You know, Ray Wilson would be George Cohen, and I'd be Roger Hunt, and more I'd go, this is Roger Hunt, you know, and they'd all go, and they wouldn't know. I mean, this is the FA officials and dignitaries, and they wouldn't know. And Morrow, just straight-faced, you know. And he'd do things like that. And I think Bobby got me into more trouble than any other footballer I've ever known. And I mean, and I've played with some villains.
Bob was a great lad. I mean, a lot of the players, when I was a player, when we used to go back to Leeds after international matches, they would say, Bobby Moore's a bit stuck up. You know, I said, not a bit of it. Bob was never stuck up. He was a quiet lad, unassuming lad, didn't interfere with anybody. Always very polite with anybody he introduced him to. Very, very nice, gracious lad, smashing lad.
Bobby was always a fella who would get people together, even though you were the opposition. He would always like be chatty and laughing. I remember coming back from a game that we up and played us at Anfield, and we had won the game, which we used to always win the game against West Ham. In fact, you know, Bill Shankly said, I hope West Ham don't go down, and somebody said, well, I never knew you were a West Ham fan. No, he says, it's 4 points for us every year. But you tell that to Muro and they would just laugh. But I was coming to London that night with my wife after the game on the train, as players, we used to travel up and down in the train in those days. And the lads were all there, the West Ham boys, and Bobby spotted me and my missus, come on down, come on, and we come move up, lads, and all move up, and what you having to drink, Betsy, what you having? And that was it, you know, in you come, never mind. All of the football business is forgotten. We're all pals, we're all together.
Again, people used to say, what were you saying on the field when you played against each other? And I mean, although both of us, I'd like to think, were I'd like to think I've been as professional as anybody else. And I know Bob has. But, you know, you'd go in for a corner and Maura would say, we'll go down to Slater's afterwards, I think, for a pint. So I'd say, all right then. And then the ball would come across and away you'd go.
Well, away Bobby eventually went to Fulham to play out the last years of his career alongside George Best, Rodney Marsh and Alan Mullery.
He was the first player I ever signed, you know, when I was a player. Alex Sock sent me over with the then Secretary Graham Hortop to sign him from West Ham. And he was a bit in awe of him, Alec, you know, so I went over to do it because I'd been playing, you know, with England over the years with him. And signed him on, came here, and on the Tuesday evening we were playing Middlesbrough. And Middlesbrough were going ever so well that season, under Jackie Charlton. And inside 25 minutes we were 4-0 down. And as he picked the ball out the back of the net, when they just scored their fourth goal, he walked up to me and he said, I think I might have made a mistake, mate. But we went on in 1975 to get to a cup final, you know, with him and I in it. And that was the lovely thing. I mean, two guys at 33 years of age playing, you know, for Fulham in a cup final.
And Bobby Moore, he really looked so relaxed, Bobby, didn't he? And so sure of himself.
We got through, we lost to, of all people, West Ham, you know, his old club. And after the game, we were walking off the pitch at Wembley, and I was a bit down in the dumps, and he put his arm around me and he said, did you enjoy it? And I said, no, I didn't really. I said, because we got beat. He said, hold on. He said, two guys our age shouldn't be playing in cup finals. So we should have enjoyed it. And that's the way he was, you know, as a person.
And to be fair, it was rare for Bobby to lose when the occasion was so important.
He liked the big stage. He would never freeze. The bigger the game, the better he would play. I mean, I always say about him, if you play in the European Cup final, he'd be fantastic. If you played in the World Cup final, he'd be better. And if he played for a world team against another planet, he would then rise another platform altogether. And he just relished the big stage.
Of course, the great moment was in 1966 in that World Cup final when he again rose to the stage there. I mean, what are your memories of Bobby Moore on that particular day?
The memories of Bobby Moore, looking at the film, some clips of the film again recently, and of course they always show the goal. But if you go backwards from the third goal, was this, and talking about the story I mentioned earlier, about his composure. When you consider that in a World Cup final, that the Germans are trying to equalise, 30 seconds a minute to go, which we all know it must have been, and the ball, they keep slinging the ball in, and then the final ball goes into Bobby, and he's inside the penalty area, and he chests it down. He chests it down. Whereas everybody else at any level, would just say, let's get the thing out of there and head it out, kick it out. He chests it down, he knocks it just 10 yards to Bawley, and he still wants it back.
Produced a bit of football. It was totally against when I was brought up in the northeast. It was like, you know, he actually passed the ball out of his own box and then dribbled the ball out of his own box and then stopped in midfield, looked up and dropped the best pass I've ever seen in my life to a running player, to Jeff Hurst, over his shoulder. Jeff went on and scored the third goal, the last goal. And I keep telling people in the dinners, I say, I didn't see the fourth goal go in because I was looking at Bobby Moore and I was thinking to myself, I'll never be able to play this bloody game, mate, you know. And it was really my best memory of Bobby because he was unusual as centre-half, but a hell of a player.
So Bobby left his mark on that fourth England goal, just as he had on the first on that World Cup winning day in July 1966. It's action that never palls, it never grows stale, and now in its way it's become a monument to one of our greatest ever players.
Took it all as a matter of course, you know. He never really ever got excited. I think when he lifted the cup, we saw his face and the great emotion of it all, but he was probably still the calmest bloke in the stadium, underneath it all.
The captain with the cup. The almost perfect Bobby, England's greatest captain. The man with a devilish sense of humour. And because of it all, his passing last Wednesday roused a nation, not least in London E17. And among the many who followed Bobby down the tunnel at West Ham, the present manager, Billy Bonds. And his assistant, Harry Redknapp.
You know, we just felt, to us, he was God. You know what I mean? Whoever played at this club, he was top man. You know, there've been some great players here. You know, Jeff and Martin Peters and Billy Bonds and Frank Lampard and Trevor Brooking. But Bobby was always the top player. You know, and always will be.
I first met him as a kid when I was 12, 13 years old. He came over and presented some medals at our local football club. And I think from that day onwards, I was just starstruck with the man. And to come and play with him 7 or 8 years later, when he'd already won the the World Cup, and I was still starstruck, and I still am to this day. In his company, I was always a little bit in awe of him, you know, and but I had the utmost admiration and respect for him.
There's talk that West Ham may withdraw the number 6 shirt now. Should there be a memorial to Bobby?
I'm sure there will be, and I sincerely hope there will be, and I believe it should happen. Some memorial, either at the FA, and certainly at the club where he spent the greater part of his career.
You don't need a statue to remember somewhere like Bobby. I don't need a statue. Maybe a little plaque at Wembley would be enough.
And our memories of him too.
Yes, I would think so.
Bobby Moore played 1,000 first-class games. The last was for Fulham at Blackburn. And the style and the poise never for a moment deserted him. But as Bobby Moore disappeared down the tunnel that day, you have to question whether football thereafter made the most of his enormous talents.
We seem to be embarrassed by the success of people in this country of ours. And when you look at Bob's last few years, and I'm not saying he struggled to make a living, he didn't, but he wasn't at the forefront of things. And now people want to put monuments up, they want to do this, they want to do that. And I suppose it's a bit of cynicism on my part in thinking, well, why didn't people do something while he was alive?
My general feeling about this is there are some great people in the game. Look at Alf Ramsey, particularly, who is tending his garden up in Ipswich. And some great brains, some great talents in football that sadly are not involved in it over a much longer period.
And Bobby Moore was, I felt, undervalued until his death, and certainly underutilised.
It was funny, I always had the impression that I knew how good Bobby was, and when you play with somebody for 10 years, at the best, you know how good he is, and you see other players. I get very annoyed when I hear reporters and pressmen saying, he's like Bobby Moore, he could be the next Bobby Moore, and I think, well, son, you don't really know what you're talking about. So I'm aware of that. I wasn't perhaps aware that so many people, and it's gratifying to know, were aware what a world-class player he was, and how dedicated he was.
He was always seeking knowledge. You know, he always wanted to know things. And like when he came to Portugal, he was like 45, 46, maybe 47, yeah. And he still was interested in the training, you know, and he was interested in different things. Why do you do this and why? And actually, his wife, Stephanie, asked me to get one of the heavy skipping ropes. It was very heavy, about £6 they weigh, and he wanted one. And she got it for his, I think his 48th birthday.
So he was fighting for fitness all along?
Yeah, yeah.
Great person, smashing lad, very down to earth, and he'd be sadly missed.
You found it easier to talk about him than maybe you thought?
A wee bit more easy, yes. I've been discussing him in the last 48 hours, and it's been very difficult. I think I was concerned that Moore might have handled this interview much better. He would control himself a wee bit better than me.
He was a remarkable fella. I mean, he really was. And having read everything about him in the press, that nobody's written any lies about him. Nobody's written any lies. It's all been the truth. He was one genuine fella.
We all felt that Bob was a personal friend, and he spent time with us all, you know, without ever being overwhelming. He just wasn't that type.
There's been a lot of emotion, I think, over the last few days over the news of Bobby. I think you're very, very touched and filled with emotion yourself now, aren't you?
Yeah, just a little bit. You get that way. We'll miss him. God bless him.
Bobby Moore's family has chosen the Imperial Cancer Research Fund to benefit from donations in his memory. And their address is Imperial Cancer Research Fund, 2 to 3 Chancery House, Tolworth, Surrey, KT6 7EW.